The night the chandelier seemed to twinkle just for him, the mansion hummed with the low thrum of wealth and the clink of expensive glass. Guests in silk and sequins floated through rooms that smelled faintly of money and perfume. A string quartet played something polite and forgettable while waiters moved like practiced shadows, offering trays of hors d'oeuvres that cost more than a week's wages for the people who cleaned the marble floors. He moved through the crowd with the practiced arrogance of someone born into entitlement. Every head turned, not always out of respect, sometimes out of curiosity. People whispered because his face sold tabloids and his name opened doors. He laughed too loud at jokes that weren't funny and drank whatever clear thing was poured into whatever stem held it. She stood across the room, leaning against a pillar, watching with a patience learned from years of turning her back on the kind of attention wealth brought. She had been invited in the sense that she worked there, to collect a vase from the florist, to pull her mother's coat straight when the math teacher insisted on formal pictures. Her hands looked like hands that had scrubbed bathtubs at dawn and folded towels by noon. Her posture said nothing about the training she'd sat through in a dusty gym 2 neighborhoods away, about gloves that smelled of sweat and leather, the sound of a heavy bag being used until it surrendered. He saw her and decided she belonged to a category he could mock without risk. He drifted across the room as if gravity favored him. When he reached her, he didn't bother with introductions. His words were a coin flipped in the air and spat out. "Is that the help?" he said, loud enough for the nearby guests to catch. Laughter, a ripple like cash registered at a checkout. She didn't laugh. She didn't move. Her face was steady, like someone used to people making incorrect assumptions. "Oh no," he sneered. "Don't give me that look. You should be cleaning something, not standing here pretending to be human," someone else offered, playing for the crowd. He smiled, a polished, dangerous thing. "Exactly. Girl, go mop the deck or ask your mother if she needs you to polish her shoes." His fingers closed around her wrist with the practiced casualness of ownership, an attempt to jerk her forward, to prove dominion. The gesture was instinctive to him. If you could grab, you could show. The room hushed. A champagne flute froze halfway to a mouth. For a second there was only the sound of the quartet and the shallow thrum of tension. Her skin flushed, not with shame but with an old, cold fire. She didn't pull away. She didn't scream. The thing he did next, he wrapped his other hand around her neck, not brutal but possessive, as if to say, "You will listen now." His thumb pressed at the angle of her jaw. His grin was visible then, cruel and small. Something uncoiled in her. A muscle tightened, not in panic but in preparation. She had learned to stay controlled under pressure. Hours of sparring had taught her how to keep focus even when breath is cheated. Her free hand went up, palms open, not asking but ready. If this had been in a gym, his hand would have been called a cheap shot. In the mansion it was spectacle. "Let go," she said softly. The words cut through the ballroom noise like a blade through silk. The people around them leaned in. He tightened his grip as if offended by a desk lamp. "You think you're tough?" he hissed. "You think you're anything?" His hand slid. She moved. Not because he loosened it but because she decided to move him. Her elbow came up in a practiced arc, a small, precise blow to the soft part of his forearm that made him flinch. The sound it made was like a misstep in a ballroom. Eyes widened. He stumbled back, more shocked than hurt. He expected capitulation. He didn't expect resistance. That was when the choke became ridiculous. He lunged again, fury stripping his manners. This time he didn't aim to push her. He aimed to humiliate. Fingers tightened at the throat like a noose made of embarrassment. The guest nearest them murmured something about calling security. The mother of the girl, standing by the punch bowl pretending to be a guest, felt her heart rack in her chest and thought of every time she had told her daughter to keep her head down, to be invisible. Something in the girl snapped into place like a lock clicked open. She had been small once. She had been underestimated her whole life. But underestimating had taught her how to plan the unexpected. Her hands found his wrist not with fury but with technical grace. She twisted with a motion that was all economy and taught logic. He expected pain to be her weapon. Instead she used balance, momentum, a student's patience. He crashed into a display of crystal. A hush turned to a gasp so loud it sounded like thunder in the silence. He hit the floor with a thud that made the chandeliers tremble. For a horrible second he looked like someone whose world had ended in slow motion. His eyes searched the room for allies, for someone to translate what had happened into an excuse. She stood over him, breathing like someone who had run and then stopped. There was no wanton triumph on her face. There was only the steely calm of someone who had been training for the exact moment when someone's hands thought they owned another person's throat. "Are you okay?" someone asked, the question brittle, not knowing to whom it belonged. He scrambled up, palms splayed against polished marble, dignity shaken more than his body. He saw the smear of his cuff on her blouse and his face did something she'd never seen it do. It blanched. "You little," he started. The words thudded uselessly against the room. Her mother stepped forward, all the mother heat and fear that had kept her daughter fed and taught. "That's enough," she said, voice flat, but it carried like authority does when it's earned. "You will leave. Now." He stormed out, his ego bruised in a way no money could smooth. The crowd split to let him pass, eyes hot with gossip and new questions. Someone filmed the scene with a phone, the recording a quiet predator. The social artery of the evening pulsed, and someone already had the clip tagged for upload. When the father came home later, breath heavy from a business dinner, he expected to find his son triumphant, perhaps awaiting a congratulatory handshake from a politician or a senator. Instead he found a room hollow with the motion of what had happened. Conversations died when his presence entered the room. The father's eyes flicked from smile to scar. He saw the crystal knocked askew. He saw the young woman standing near his mother, shoulders straight, eyes unblinking. "What happened?" he asked, and the question was a small bridge between worlds. He heard the story sanded down through the voices of servants and guests, each account polishing away the rough edges. He heard his son's version first, which cast the girl as insolent, overstepping. He heard his housekeeper's retelling, which was quieter and full of names of places that mattered. He heard the girl's, which was short and precise. "She was choking me," the son said. "She attacked me. I was defending myself." "She defended herself," the girl replied when given the chance. Her voice was uncluttered by the theatrics of privilege. "He put his hands on me. I made him stop." The father turned to his son and saw something like fear. If money could buy absolution, he realized, it hadn't covered everything. He watched his child flinch at the seriousness of being held accountable. For the first time in a long while, he felt his position split in half, the father of a spoiled boy and the employer of a woman whose daughter had been assaulted. He called his son into his study later, and the conversation was not the sermon the son expected. It was quieter, more dangerous. "You hurt someone," the father said. There was no shouting, only the heavy accumulation of disappointment. "You hurt a person who has been loyal to this household longer than you've been alive." The son bristled. "She fought back," he retorted, angry that anyone would make him feel small in the house where he'd been raised. "You started it," the father said. "You think the world bends because you were born first. Learn to apologize." The son stared. Apologize was an unfamiliar verb in his vocabulary. He left the study with a slamming door that echoed like a missed opportunity. But consequences rippled like a pebble tossed into a lake. The father, who had avoided the glare of the press for years by paying for silence when silence had been cheaper than truth, found the clip online 2 hours after the night ended. There it was, the gasp, the shove, the fall. The comments were predictably cruel, the hashtags a small engine grinding toward momentum. He could have directed a lawyer to have it taken down. He could have paid to have the narrative rewritten. Instead, he walked down to the gym 2 neighborhoods over. He watched the girl from the doorway. She was wrapping her hands, the motion familiar, skilled. Her coach, a broad-shouldered man with a face like someone who tells hard truths, nodded at her like a baseball catcher nods at a batter. There was a respect there that money couldn't buy. "You did what you had to," the coach told her, wiping a towel over his hands. "But that wasn't just a fight. That was a moment. You need options." The father stepped into the light. His suit was a poor fit for a gym. He held out an envelope with an offer in it. No fanfare, no cameras, just a businesslike proposition. "I can help," he said. "College. Training. Sponsor tournaments. I can do what I didn't know to do before." She hesitated. Trust doesn't grow on riches. But he wasn't asking to buy silence. He was offering resources. Her mother would be able to retire from night shifts. The gym would have new equipment. Her coach would be able to support more kids. "What about him?" she asked, voice steady. "Your son?" "He will face consequences," the father said. "He will work. He will learn. If he wants to make amends, he will earn it. Not by words, but by work." The son was not a man who changed overnight. He sulked and staged rebellions and tried to reclaim dignity by throwing temper tantrums that money had usually soothed. He was sent to volunteer at the gym. He was tasked with mopping floors, fixing the old equipment, being present in a space where his hands did real work for the first time. He watched the girl train and the world kept moving. He started by watching her, then by carrying water, then by listening. There were fits and starts. The boy who once choked to exert power found his throat tight when he tried to swallow the idea that brute force was proof of anything. He tripped, made worse mistakes, apologized clumsily and sometimes not at all. But he saw his father extend chances to people his son had mocked. He watched the girl rise to leave the ring with a trophy or with a loss and the same focus. Those quiet moments of repetition chipped at arrogance. Months later, at a small tournament where the crowd smelled like vinyl and sweat rather than perfume, the father sat in the bleachers and watched his son hand a towel to the girl before her match. The gesture was small, formalized, a token purchased with effort. She took it, nodded, and walked into the ring to do what she had always done: fight with what she had. The son stayed at the edge of the gym, watching, learning that respect is earned and sometimes given when someone proves themselves worthy. When she won, the applause was honest. The father caught her eye and she gave a simple, almost imperceptible smile. It was not for him. It was for the work that had carried her there. They never erased what happened at the party. They never made the awkwardness disappear. But the night taught a family something they'd been pretending not to know. Power can be used to punish and to protect. Money can buy comfort and training, but it cannot forge character. Only people can do that, in gyms and in late-night conversations and in the quiet moments of choosing to be better. On a humid evening months later, the son came to the gym without the pretense of looking for attention. He carried a bag of supplies, new hand wraps, fresh gloves. He set them down and looked at her. "I'm sorry," he said, and it was a small, true thing. She took it. Forgiveness is not the erasing of hurt. It's the decision to refuse being defined by it. She nodded once, because sometimes a nod is enough to close a chapter and begin another. Outside, the mansion's lights blinked on, indifferent. Inside, a different kind of light pulsed, one that had nothing to do with wealth and everything to do with the slow, stubborn work of people learning how to treat each other.